That Jillian was horrible. She didn't even care if Leigh froze to death.
You didn't say one lie. Jillian really didn't care about her daughter. How you ain't gonna care about Leigh? How Tony Tatterton, touching Tony Tatterton, care more about your child? Sydney Bisbee, she was playing that role because she was pissing me off. Didn't care about your child. Didn't care about little baby Troy. She gets the worst mother. The worst. The absolute worst Mother of the Year award. Period.
Hey everyone, thank you for stopping by my channel. Today Alphia and I will be discussing the final book in the Casteel series. This one is the prequel, Web of Dreams, about the events leading up to Leigh Diane Van Vereen's pregnancy and flight from Farthinggale circa the 1950s. If you haven't already, please subscribe to my channel and Alphia's so that you won't miss any of our new content. We do collaborations occasionally. So Web of Dreams uses the plot device of a diary to tell Leigh Van Vereen's story. It's a diary that Heaven's daughter Annie and nephew Luke find at Farthinggale when they arrive there for Troy's funeral. Troy is Annie's father, as we learn at the end of Gates of Paradise. Luke lets her know she doesn't have to attend the funeral service if she doesn't want to. I mean, they're already there. This is probably a conversation they could have had before they got in the car. Also, why would she not attend the funeral of her father? Luke Jr.'s like, you only knew he was your father for a few years. By that logic, why bother attending anyone's funeral if you only knew them for a few years? You're being an a-hole, Luke. Just let her be. Let her attend her father's funeral, for crying out loud. Anyway, while at Farthinggale, Annie and Luke take a tour of the mansion for some reason. Not sure why Annie wants to bring back bad memories of wheelchairs and being sedated by an evil nurse, but there you go. And she runs into Rye, who gives her her grandmother's diary. And Annie reads it because it's okay to read your grandmother's diary if your grandmother's dead. It's funny because she had just been saying to Luke that she wanted to know more about her grandmother, and then Rye appears shortly after, just handing over this diary that could have been lost long ago in the Willies, but somehow ended up back at Farthinggale. So anyway, Leigh's diary opens with talk of her birthday. I'm not sure how old she is turning. She looks about 16, 17, 18, but in the book, I believe it opens with her 12th birthday. Kinda reminds me of the opening of The Diary of Anne Frank, minus all the stuff about Hitler and World War II, of course, because Leigh gets the new diary as a birthday gift. In the movie, she even has short, dark hair like Anne Frank. In the book, she has blonde hair, and I'm kinda annoyed they didn't just let her have blonde hair, because that was a big part of the story, how Heaven was the dark-haired version of her mother, which is why the second book was called Dark Angel. Angel was Leigh's nickname when she married Heaven's father, Luke Casteel. We learn in this movie that Angel was the name of Leigh's portrait doll Tony Tatterton made for her. In the book Dark Angel, by the way, he flat out denies making a doll for Leigh when Heaven brings it up. A little sensitive there, are you, Tony? Anyway, at the beginning of the movie, Leigh's mother Jillian is married to Cleve Van Vereen, who has a cruise line business, and he apparently makes decent money, but it's not enough as far as Jillian's concerned. Jillian tells her daughter how when she was young, she was treated horribly by her sisters, made to feel ugly and inferior, and was forced to do all the housework like Cinderella. But then Cleve came along, and he chose her instead of her evil sisters, and the rest is history. But now Jillian feels she settled for less than she was worth. She's got her eye on Tatterton toy heir, Mr. Tony T himself, Mr. Touchy Toucherton, who's hired her to paint a mural in his home. She's led him to believe she's only 28. He's in his early 20s in the book, and I assume in the movie as well. Jillian's actually about 40, according to the book. I can't remember if it says how old she is in the movie. At one point in the movie, Leigh tries to correct a misconception about her mother's age when talking with Tony, but Jillian quickly steps in because Tony is not to know how much older than him she really is. Jillian is very vain, very concerned with her looks and with wealth and status. She believes a woman's sole purpose is to marry well and basically be arm candy for her man. Tony has a little brother Troy, of course. In the book, baby brother is only about 3 when he first meets Jillian and Leigh. In the movie, he looks to be somewhere around 9 or so. Whatever. I would have preferred him to be younger in the movie Dark Angel. In the movie Web of Dreams, it actually works for him to be a little older than 3. I have to say, they did a great job casting a young Tony. He's got that 90210 look about him, like he could be a young Jason Priestley. And he's got crazy eyes. He's so obviously creepy that it's odd to me no one intervened and was like, maybe Leigh shouldn't be hanging around this older creepy man. You would think her father would have said more about how inappropriate he was being, even if he eventually just acquiesced with Jillian's wishes. But yeah, right from the beginning, Tony's flirting with Leigh, dancing with her at a party right in front of her father. Cleve is predictably more concerned with the way Jillian is dancing, with Tony right under his nose. Jillian wants a divorce, and Cleve obliges. Not long after, Tony and Jillian get engaged. So now Leigh and her mother will be moving into Farthy with Tony. Leigh is very upset about this. Her mother thinks she should be grateful she's not sending her packing to boarding school. Jillian's a real gem of a mom. But Leigh and Troy do become close, and when they get lost in the hedge maze during a storm one day, she helps shield him from the cold. I suppose it's the least she could do, brother or not. No, you're not my brother. I'm not going to help shield you from the cold. What the hell? Jillian and Tony are upstairs in their bedroom, their mind on other things, when a servant comes knocking and says that the children are missing. Tony is extremely concerned because he is very protective of his little brother. Jillian acts like she couldn't care less if Leigh dies of hypothermia. Tony goes out into the maze with some men and finds the two kids and brings them back into the mansion. Troy is in fact suffering from hypothermia, but Tony is so grateful to Leigh that she protected him by giving the little boy her coat. Tony fixes a warm bath for Leigh. Like Kitty Dennison in the first book, this guy has serious boundary issues and expects Leigh to get undressed and climb into the tub while he's standing right there. He does at least turn his back to allow her a little bit of privacy, but when she's in the tub, he starts washing her with a sponge, and it's so gross. And seriously, I feel this is where V.C. Andrews and the Ghostwriter differ. In Heaven, V.C. Andrews was able to show how Heaven and Cal's relationship turned inappropriate without jumping straight into weirdo territory. It began slowly. Tony comes right out and tells Leigh that he wants her to model for his line of dolls. I'm sure Tony understood that her mother wasn't going to step in and help her. In fact, Jillian catches the two of them in the bathroom together. She's actually jealous. And then later she tells Leigh she probably made too big of a thing about it. And when Leigh is like, hold up, you were right the first time. It's gross. Her mother's like, oh, you, stop being such a teenager. Tony's your father now. Grow up. Jillian definitely is up there for worst mother, though Corinne in the Dollenganger saga probably takes the prize. Sorry, it's hard to beat locking up your kids and poisoning them with arsenic while also grooming your teen son into an Oedipal relationship. Leigh does have her grandmother Jana, who says, if you ever need me, I'm there for you. I wish Jana had been played by someone who had a little bit more of a bite to her, someone like Cloris Leachman, for instance. Jana sees right through her daughter, but she's blinded by Tony's charms. She compares him to Dean Martin. You have to remember, this took place before Beverly Hills 90210, otherwise she might have compared him to Jason Priestley. So Jillian finds out about Tony's prenup, and she blames Leigh for it. She's furious that if she were to ever divorce Tony, she wouldn't get his money. Totally legit concern, right? Jillian's also insecure and worried that Leigh will take Tony away from her. In the book, it's implied that Jillian actually wanted Leigh to be a mistress to her husband because he tired the old lady out with all of his youthful bedroom demands. Leigh doesn't want a man like Tony, though. She'd prefer a man like her father, and this is where Jillian starts to plant seeds in Leigh's mind that her father doesn't care for her anymore because he never visits or writes. As it turns out, Jillian has been holding on to Cleve's letters to Leigh, hiding them from her daughter because, she's evil, and that's what evil mothers do. Jillian has meanwhile been telling Cleve to stay away from Leigh because he's not her biological father and threatening him with legal action if he doesn't obey. Jillian is so heartless that when Troy gets sick during her honeymoon and is on his deathbed, she acts inconvenienced when Tony rushes home to be with him in the hospital. She doesn't care that her little stepson is at death's door. Leigh, on the other hand, cares very much and worries about the little boy. Tony starts to feel ignored by Jillian, but maybe he's just using this as an excuse to get closer to his stepdaughter. He asks her to model for him. The book is much more graphic than the movie when it comes to the modeling sessions, so just be warned. And he makes her a portrait doll that looks more like a streetwalker than a child's toy. I have to say, the doll looks nothing like Leigh, but apparently it's supposed to have her face and her mother's body. Leigh thinks it's disgusting. Tony flips out when she criticizes the doll and starts knocking things off tables and shelves. He then takes a knife to her and threatens her with it. I don't remember that being in the book, before calming down a bit and telling her it's okay. He'll just make another doll. It's all good. Tony seems a bit unhinged. You think? By the way, when he was sketching Leigh for the doll, he had her pose without her clothes on. I forgot to mention that. Leigh went to her mother for help because she didn't like what he was requesting of her, and her mother was like, "Stop being a baby. We need the money these dolls will bring in." Tony also laid it on thick with a guilt trip, saying this is what art is all about, showing her pictures of naked statues in books to prove his point. Anyway, Tony does fix the doll for Leigh. She loves the new version of it and calls her doll Angel. Now it's time for Leigh's birthday again. Apparently we've taken another trip around the sun without realizing it. There's a boy Leigh has had her eye on. She often sees him riding by on a bicycle. He comes to her party. His name is James. He tries to kiss her, but Tony acts like a possessive father, kills surprise, and scares him off. Now Tony is in Leigh's room at night, sitting in front of her fireplace like some supervillain, talking about how Troy is back in the hospital. But that's not the point of his visit. The point is that he intends to her, and he does. The next morning, her governess comes upon her as she's taking a bath. Leigh looks completely traumatized, but what else is new? The governess informs her that Tony is away on a business trip. Who knows when he will be back? Poor Leigh thinks maybe now her mother will listen to her when she goes to her for help. Does mother listen to her when she tells her Tony her? No. Jillian tells Leigh that didn't happen. That was just a dream. Sounds like Jillian missed her calling. She could have been a fine lyricist for REM. A fine mother? Not so much. Maybe in her dreams. Leigh goes into her room and shatters her mirror in anger. She stops short of smashing her doll. Tony is gone for 7 weeks. When Leigh gets word he will be returning shortly, she is filled with dread. And then, to make matters worse, she discovers she's pregnant. Jillian wants her to get an abortion. In fact, she takes it a step further by saying if only she could go back in time and abort Leigh. I mean, that would kill 2 birds with 1 stone, I guess. I agree this should have never become a mother, but, well, she did become one, and no need punishing Leigh for the fact that she effed up. Leigh decides she will instead pack up a suitcase and slip out when her mother's not looking. She tries to locate her dad, Cleve, but finds out he's currently at a wedding. His own wedding, in fact, because he got engaged to another woman and she didn't even realize. So then Leigh travels to her grandmother's house, only to find out her grandmother died a few days ago. What are the odds? Could she have picked a more inconvenient time to die? So Leigh is on her own, trying to catch some sleep at a train station, when she meets a guy named Luke Casteel. He can tell she's in trouble and he offers to help. He takes her out to a diner for some food and then to a motel to spend the night. He's a gentleman and offers to sleep in his truck while she takes the bed, but she says that's not necessary, so he sleeps on the floor. He takes her back to his home in Winterow to meet his mother and banjo-playing father. Luke and Leigh soon get married. He knows the baby is not his, but he's happy to raise the little peanut. They even seem to know it's a girl. I have no idea how they know that. I find it hard to believe a doctor told them that. He plans to build a little log cabin for them. And then, one day out of the blue, she goes into labor while they're out in the middle of nowhere. Cut to Annie Stonewall, Leigh's granddaughter, back at Farthy, reaching the end of the diary. She comes across a note from a detective informing Tony Tatterton of the loss of his stepdaughter. And here is her journal, because what use does grief-stricken Luke have for it? And so just like that, the story of Leigh Diane Van Vereen has come to an abrupt end. She lived such a hard life. Annie remarks to Luke Jr. that she also was incredibly brave to escape her abusive home and try to forge a new life for herself without the benefit of the wealth she left behind. Monster Mother Jillian could learn a thing or two about strength of character and a backbone of steel from her young daughter. And that's all I have to say for now. Alphia, what are your thoughts? I can't wait to hear them.
Hey everyone, it's your girl Alphia. Thank you so much, Jennifer, for this breakdown. And this is the last movie of the Heaven series. This is Web of Dreams. Now, this one I want to really unpack and discuss with you guys about some things. So we meet Leigh. Now, in my honest opinion, I think they should have did this movie first and then did a backstory of everything else. Did this movie and then we could have did like step by step, but it didn't happen that way. So let's get into it. So of course we meet Leigh, her mother Jillian, and you know Jillian is Heaven's grandmother and Leigh is Heaven's mother. And Leigh is having a birthday party. Her dad is like, her mom is planning it and her dad's paying for it. Her daddy is Cleve, and Cleve, we find out later on in the movie, not too much and too far deep into the movie, that Cleve was not her father, and her grandmother had came to visit. So okay, let me break this down. So her mother Jillian was a painter, so of course that's where Heaven's daughter Anna gets it from, which is Leigh's granddaughter. And we meet Luke when he was younger, Luke Casteel. And Luke Casteel, actually, I'm going to go ahead and say it. Luke Casteel was actually a good guy before the whole thing and then after Leigh died. Okay, so Leigh's mother, Jillian, was always trash, in my honest opinion, because you had a hard-working husband that was taking care of you, but it wasn't enough. He didn't have enough money for you, but he was working, he owned a cruise ship. And of course, around those times, it wasn't really popular, but it was kind of semi-popular, but it wasn't really popular, I guess. And he was working hard, and they only had one maid, and Jillian wasn't happy about that. She wanted a life of luxury. So, of course, she gets linked up with Tony Tatterton, touching Tony Tatterton. Okay, good. Tony Tatterton was 10 years younger than she was. Well, no, hold on. 10 years older than her daughter was. So, mind you this, why you never just hooked him up with your daughter? I mean, like, he could have been betrothed to your daughter, but, of course, till she got to a certain age, she could have been with him. But no, Jillian wanted him for herself. And I'm going to go ahead and say, you could tell he was looking at the daughter way before he wasn't even looking at the mama no more. Because she took her daughter, she's like, I'm going to show you where basically, because she was trying to make sure her daughter lived a life with rich. She's like, Leigh was like, I want to marry a guy like Papa. She was such an admiration of her father, and it was so sweet that you could tell that Leigh really loved her father, Cleve, and Cleve really did adore her, because we learned that Jillian actually was pregnant when she married Cleve, and he was not the father, and the grandmother arranged it. Jillian's mother arranged it, and he, it really didn't go into details. I guess the book would go more into detail about it. So he married her. They were together for a while, and then she told him at Leigh's birthday she wanted a divorce. But mind you this, okay, before Leigh's birthday, which was the birthday of her day, she took Leigh to Tony Tatterton's house, and she met Troy, baby Troy at the time. Poor little Troy. He looked like he was just one of those adventurous children. So him and Leigh hit it off really well. She was like even though Leigh was a little older than he was, they hit off as friends, and they was really, really cool, and Tony was showing them around or whatever, and Jillian was painting a picture. And after Tony had showed them around, he's like, he had to go do something. He went to go do the booty with Miss Jillian, and Jillian is married to Cleve at the time, and she's been messing with Tony Tatterton because he had money and he was younger, and I guess he made her feel alive, and Jillian was always after money, so she got what she deserved. So yeah, Leigh caught Tony zipping up Jillian's dress and kissing her on her back. And Leigh was like, she told Leigh, he was just helping me fix my dress. She was like, that's not what it is, mama. So the birthday party happens, and Tony Tatterton, of course, comes through. He doesn't right away shake Mr. Cleve's hand. He goes straight to Jillian, and Jillian is just so smitty with him, and like your whole husband's not sitting there and your daughter's not sitting there. And him and Leigh have a conversation, and then he does end up shaking Mr. Cleve's hand. It was just a mess, and Cleve gives Leigh a necklace, and she's in admiration about it. And they go back into the party, and they see her mom and Tony, and she looks and sees that her husband's looking. She puts Tony's hand on her rear end, and he's like, I need to talk to you, Jillian. She's like, it's not that serious. And I'm just like, wow, this is crazy. Jillian, you're crazy. So she tells Cleve she wants a divorce, and Leigh hears it, and Leigh is so upset. The next day, her dad moves out, and he goes on about his life, basically, because Jillian threatened him because she knew that he was not Leigh's father. So she had the courts get involved, And it was just so sad. I felt so bad for Leigh. At least Troy was there for her. And Tony was just a creep. And he ended up SAing her. And she's told her mom some things. Even before he SA'd her. She went to her mother and was like, Mom, he wants me to, because he wants to do a doll of Leigh. And he wants to use her as a model, and he asked her to get, naked, and she was like, I don't want to do it. And he was like, I'm your father. And y'all, it was just crazy, because the first time they had a moment was, okay, her and Troy went to the maze, and they got lost, and it was pouring down raining because the storm came. And I'm gonna go ahead and say it, Jillian, you could see that Tony cared about them, but it was just a lot, y'all. He went to go look for them, and Jillian was like, well, he's like, you stay here. I wasn't going. I'm just like, Jillian, you're an ishy ass mother, like crazy. And then you was an ishy ass grandmother too, like, oh my god. And she told her daughter, basically, when she came to her and said, Tony wants me to pose nude. She was like, well, you gotta support us. Well, not basically like support us, like, you basically have to, like, we gotta make him happy. Girl, Jillian, that's your husband, that's your job. And we learned that Jillian actually stopped sleeping with him, like being sexual intercourse with him. And I guess that's how he decided to sleep with S.A. Leigh. And it was so sad, y'all. The first time she caught them was in the tub before he had her, warm up in the tub after the whole accident with her and Troy, and she was cold, and he was like, well, he took her to go run a bath. He was like, you can take your robe off, whatever. So she turned around, she got in the tub, and he came bent beside her, and he started trying to wash her, and she's like, this is not right. And he was like, it's fine, I'm your father. He put his hands on her arm, and she was like, no, she didn't want that. And her mother walks in, and her mother was like, basically he left or whatever. And then her mother was like, he's my man. And she's like, Mom, I don't want him. Even when she had a conversation with her daughter, she was like, Tony, don't take Tony from me. And she's like, Mom, he likes you. I'm just like, y'all, can you and this really does happen. Like, women really do have men be looking at their children, and then they be getting mad at their children, like, no, you need to get your daughter, a son or daughter, away from that creep. And I'm just like, y'all, this is crazy. Jillian was just crap. And then the lady that played her, Sydney Bisbee, I love Sydney Bisbee, great actress, phenomenal. She has very range, and I loved it because she was pissing me off, and I'm like, girl, I love you because I love your acting. You're just like diverse with it. And I was so mad, y'all. I was like, man, she's playing the heck out of Jillian, because Jillian was making me want to jump through the TV and strangle her. Because, man, what the heck, ma'am? Leigh went through a lot. Her grandmother came to visit. Tony actually asked Jillian for a prenup. So you was after his money the whole time. So I said, if we get divorced, I get nothing. She's like, she's like, Leigh, this is your fault. She was like, no, it wasn't. And she thinks that because her grandmother comes, and her grandmother's like, I think you're safe here. I think you're going to be in a better place. But if something's going on, you can come home to Texas with me. I think her grandmother should have said, her grandma only said, like, it wasn't even a whole 24 hours. You come to visit them. And she was like, that's when Leigh finds out that Cleve is not her father. She was like, it was hard it was already hard marrying you off because, you already had a button of, and we knew it wasn't his baby. We knew it wasn't Cleve baby. She looks nothing like Cleve. It's like, oh, mother, please. Like, she's basically trying to say that baby is his. Like, no, it was not Cleve's baby. And it was just sad, but I'm going to go ahead and say that was a real man that stepped up again. Just like, it's just crazy, y'all. It's just crazy. This movie was actually really, really good, but Web of Dreams, I think, was my most favorite one. My most favoriteest one out of all of the Heaven series, because in the beginning of the movie, it opens up with Leigh writing her diary, because she gets her diary from her dad, and then it flashes forward to what's her name, Annie, coming to the funeral of Troy, because Troy sadly passes away. And I really did like Troy. I was team Troy. And he passes, and the chef had the diary that he wanted, that Troy told him to give to Annie so she can read of her grandmother Leigh, and she learns about what Leigh went through. After Tony essayed her, he went away for 7 weeks and she became pregnant. And that's how we talked about in one of the Heaven series, the second movie, where they knew about her being pregnant with Heaven, and how Heaven was trying to lie and cover it up. And it was so sad, y'all. So Leigh was pregnant and she ran away, and she went to Texas to go find her grandmother. Go stay with her grandmother. She walks in her grandmother's house, and she knocks on the door, and the lady says, "Come in." And she goes in, and there's a realtor sitting right there. She didn't know what was going on. So, "I'm looking for my grandmother." And she's like, "Your grandmother?" She's like, "Yeah, this is her house," or whatever. And the lady tells her that her grandma had passed a couple nights ago. And I'm gonna go ahead and say it. So, Jillian, you didn't know your mama passed? Or maybe it happened while she was leaving, when she got on the train or whatever. And she was sleeping on the bench in the train station, and I guess the guy that runs the little station, whatever, or the train station, said she couldn't sleep here. And Luke stepped in and said, she's with me or whatever. He took her to go get something to eat, and he did say something about marrying her because the way she was, I guess because he liked the way she was eating and how her spirit was or whatever. And he ends up, he was telling her he worked at the circus. So Luke has always worked at the circus. And then he was able to buy by selling his kids off or whatever. And him and Leigh hit it off really good. He takes Leigh home, and him and Leigh get married. And unfortunately, of course, in Heaven, you learn that her fate does not last long. She actually sadly passes away, giving birth to Heaven. And let's back up. So remember when I told y'all Tony had her pose for the doll, and she actually, the first doll came out was actually supposed to have her face and then her mom's body, and I'm just like, wow. And then she was like, "No, this is not me." And he's like, "Yeah, it's supposed to be your mom," whatever. Then so he changes it, and she end up naming the doll Angel. And then we learn about Heaven gets the doll when she gets older, and Kitty ends up breaking her doll because she's mad at Heaven. And it's really, really sad because that's the way she had her mom from Tony Tatterton's toys, the Tatterton toys. And it's just really sad, y'all. It really is. Like, this movie was really, really sad. But it was really, I liked it though, because it gave us a backstory. I love movies when they give us backstories. I have to sit here and just read, or well, not even read, but I have to ponder and put my own backstory together. I love when they have like a movie that gives you a backstory. And yeah, because Annie was like, "Where's the rest of the diary?" Because her grandma didn't get to finish it. Then there was a note saying basically that Annie had sadly passed away. Not Annie, Leigh had sadly passed away, giving birth to a baby girl named Heaven. And Jillian I wondered if she even tried to reach out to her daughter while she was pregnant. And I wonder what really happened. I know she did lose her life giving birth to Heaven. Like, did they say why? I know that childbirth is very dangerous. I never had a child, so I've always heard, and I just hearing stories and how people have passed on after having babies. It's just really, really sad. But I rate this movie a 10 out of 10. I highly recommend. VC Andrews has a lot of good movies and shows and books. I hope that you guys can check it out. I hope you guys loved my review. Web of Dreams was worth the watch. Do have your Kleenex boxes awaiting, because I would have loved to see Luke and Leigh like hit it off and like really be good parents. And I think Heaven's story would have been way different, and I would have loved that. But it didn't sadly happen like that. Leigh passed away giving birth to her baby girl Heaven, and Luke never got over it. And you could tell that Luke really did love her, because when he brought her home, his mom's like, "Is that your baby?" He was like, "Mom, don't think like that," or whatever. Like, basically, like, don't judge her because it wasn't his. But you don't know her story. And that girl came from, money, because her dad, Cleve, even had money. It wasn't as much money as Tony Tatterton, but she had money, and money didn't define her. She didn't care about money. She wanted to be that little girl that was, that loved her father and wanted to be loved. She didn't care about money. She told her mom and dad. Her mom's like, "Everything is about money." And I'm just like, yo, Jillian, this is that. That's why Jen, you could tell even from the Web of Dreams, Jillian was drinking then. She was drinking dark liquor to the margarita y'all, it was just a lot. She went through a lot, and she was a trash mother. Who would let somebody essay their daughter, and you know about it, and you thought your daughter came onto him and you was trying to say she was fast? Your daughter was not fast. You knew that man didn't have eyes for you, because as soon as he seen Leigh, he didn't. Jillian who, but she got hers in the end, and Tony got his in the end. I like the fact that Troy made sure she got her grandmother's diary, and she got to read it, and she got to know about the story, and it was sweet. It was really, I want to cry now because it was so sweet. But it was sad he passed, and yeah, and she got to go back to Farthinggale and get closure again. But I wonder what happened to, like, does she get the house? Does she get what happens? So yeah. But that's my review. Thanks again, Jennifer, for letting me tune into your channel again. You guys have a good one.
Thank you so much for joining me today, Alphia. It was great to hear your thoughts, and I think we both agree Jillian was trash. And by trash, I don't mean like Chinese food that's still left over in the container that you throw out trash. I mean like gunk in the drain of a tub trash. So yeah, Jillian was trash. Very, very sad movie. Sad book. I would give the book and the movie probably 3.5 out of 5 stars. So that's it for today. Thank you, everyone, for listening to us. Please subscribe, like our channels. Have a great day.